Much of the explanations given within the Sacred Seven Academy center around Sabian symbols, of course, and specifically the Elven Star, because we're studying the number seven. And if you look at Sabian symbols through the lens of seven, then it's best done with the Elven Star. Now, this is a relatively new idea. Septiles are involved here, the division of a circle into seven, and these would be considered aspects within normal astrology. However, they haven't been studied at all much. Very little is written on this topic, and that which is written doesn't really give forth a tool of use. And this is addressed within our teachings in the Sacred Seven Academy. We're trying to use septiles in a very pragmatic way to bring deeper understandings of who we are and how to be. The reason why septiles have not been much used before is not because they're not useful, it's because they're very difficult to calculate. It's hard to divide 360 by 7 in your head. So astrologers, until computers were invented and used collectively a lot, couldn't do it. In my early days of astrology, nobody studied septiles at all. Hardly studying quintiles, but only because they're difficult to calculate. Now, you can get the calculation done very easily. I'll put the link in the description. You just go to my website and put your birth date in and you have your Elven Star. Now, the Elven Star can be drawn up for any of the planets or points. So you can have an Elven Star of the Ascendant if you want. And you have to be very, very careful with that. If your birth time is not accurate to within a minute or two, it's not as reliable. However, all of the planets can be calculated. And if we just think about what it means to consider the septiles of the sun, well, it's like a prism. When white light is put through a prism, it creates 7 different colors. And this is exactly the same metaphor. When we look at the Elven Star of the sun, we're seeing the expanded, more richly expressive sense of self. If it's the moon, it would be a different aspect of self that we're looking at, but again, expanded in rich form. The Elven Star looks beneath the surface of things. Now, you're probably familiar already with the Sabian symbol of your sun position, and you have some intuitive understanding of what that means within your personality. And this is where we start, the Sabian symbol of the sun. Let's study the Elven Star of the sun at the moment. The first point of the Elven Star is the Sabian symbol of the sun. It's the degree of your sun in your horoscope, the Elven Star first point. The other 6 points are much more obscure. We probably don't know about them. And that's what we're going to address in this video. So the reason why sevenness and septiles gain our attention is because the number 7 relates to the world of myth and magic. It's the place where unicorns and centaurs have meaning. They're not physical, but that doesn't mean they're not real. They have an impact upon us. How could anybody argue that our collective mythology of our species is irrelevant to understanding who we are and what we are within our species? Of course, mythology is important. It's just very obscure. And the stories that are written, mythological stories from Greece and all the other cultures, they're very obscure mostly. And they're not definitive. They don't really say what the message is. So that's the area of sevenness. We don't know what it means. We have to rely to a very large degree on intuition. However, when people do that and they rely upon their intuition, they tend to trust it without the disciplined checking against reasonableness and facts. And that leads them to self deception almost. Just because you want it to be the case, it doesn't make it the case. Just because you have an inner feeling that it is so, that doesn't make it so. Your intuition doesn't always tell the truth unless you practice it a lot. The more you trust your intuition, the better it gets, of course. But there is always the potential for self-deception with intuition. So we have to try and form a balance when we're studying the Elven Star between what's a reasonable interpretation of the Elven Star points on the one hand, and how our intuition moves us into this realm of mystical, magical, mythological, intuitive reality. It's a subtle teaching. It's a really subtle teaching, but that's what we're about. Now, the point is when you get into that realm of mythology and using intuition to give any understanding at all, it has to be understood that you're creating your own narrative. And here we get to the crux of the matter. The Elven Star, especially, for example, the Elven Star of the Sun, enables you to create your life narrative much more meaningfully, much more richly. To be authentic, you have to tune into your own interpretation of the sun sign and align with that at all times, in all situations. However, each situation calls upon a different facet of your authentic self. It can be in alignment with the first point of the Elven Star, the Sabian symbol of your sun sign. It must be in alignment with that in some way, but there are different ways to be in alignment with it. Let's give you an example, metaphorically speaking. You take yourself to a sports event and you cheer loudly for your side, or a funeral and you dress conservatively and you maintain the dignity of being consistent with the mood, or in a love affair where you allow your emotional body to show itself more clearly, or in a business transaction when you don't do that and you get sharp and clear about your own priorities and you conflict with the opponent in your business transaction. All manner of different expressions of self are demanded of you in life. And the authentic self can do that and does do that. It expresses differently according to scenarios and according to people that you're with and according to moods that you have and according to how you are aging. It changes over the years. If you're interested enough to study astrology and therefore come to a fairly profound self-understanding compared to most people, and you want to take that further to embrace a more spiritual dimension, then the Elven Star will help you do that. Because the Elven Star gives you 7 points of reference. The essential Sabian symbol of your sun sign is almost like a gateway into a deeper, more subtle world where you can explore facets of self using the Elven Star. So that's basically what the Elven Star is all about. What this means is that we have the tools, words, to create the narrative of who we are. And as we do that, 2 things happen. First of all, we become clear about that. And you notice that who you are is substantively created by being a copy of your father and your mother and other very, very early influences. But changed. That copy is changed by the soul self. Your soul is expressing its unique self, nothing to do with your parents. So that combination is typically the balance of development of the authentic self. As you go older and older and older, you move away from the influences of the parents to an appropriate level. You don't take on their stuff quite so much. You don't live out their visions vicariously for them quite so much. You become a blend of it all by your own choice. Now, the choice that we have is significantly expanded by the suggestions given by the Elven Star points. They're ambiguously written on purpose so that you get a sense of what it means. You get a feeling sense and some words that defines the area that we're looking at and talking about. But it's not definitive. You have to fill in the gaps yourself. Now, this is Neptune's function in astrology, to fill in the gaps between the facts of the matter. And you fill those gaps in with your own personal imagination. And that's what our life narrative turns out to be, an expression of our imagination of what's going on in the world, who we are, our interface with the world as who we are with what's going on. The Elven Star expands your sense of what's going on sevenfold. In any situation, 7 fundamental things are happening that are not the same as each other at all. Collectively, they represent the whole experience. Individually, they represent as if the 7 colors of the rainbow. So we could see this understood in the 7 words languaging as no, my boundaries are here. Hello, I'm expanding my horizons of curiosity expressed. Thank you. I appreciate some things better than other things. I have value judgments to make about that. I like this person better than that person. And I appreciate life generally. That's thank you. Goodbye. You move on. You move on with clarity and incisive decision making. Please, your vision that you share with other people cooperatively and collaboratively. Sorry, you make mistakes. You deal with it. You move on. And yes, you get whatever life dishes out despite your plans. That's the 7 words. Now you can see that that would lend itself very readily to the Elven Star, which is a 7-pointed star. And indeed, we have allocated the 7 points of the Elven Star to the 7-word system. So point number 1 is no, and that's the sun sign, and that's mainly what we're talking about today. I'll do other videos for the other points later. So no is experienced when somebody's pushing you and you've had enough. I've been polite, I've been tolerant, I've been forgiving, I've been all manner of things, but you're asking more of me than I'm willing to give. I say, no, this is my line, this is my boundary. And that is the place where you find out who you are. That's your definition of self on the basic level. Now, if we look into an example, let me give myself as an example. I have the first point of my Elven Star of the Sun, in other words, the Sabian symbol of my sun, as old man, trying in vain to reveal the mysteries. And I become a teacher with teachings that are a little bit too subtle for the majority of people interested in astrology and so on. And so I can't reveal the secrets of what I'd like to be able to reveal. Generally speaking, that's my life story. However, if I start to look at the Elven Star points from 2 to 7, I would get nuances of that energy and how I can express it and redeem it in a sense that it seems a bit of a negative interpretation until you understand it better. And I can rewrite the narrative of my life from being somebody who is not getting his point across to somebody who generally doesn't get his point across. I can't explain this to the man on the Clapham omnibus, as we say in England. The ordinary man of the street, woman of the street, they don't have any interest in this. They don't have any capacity to understand this. They've not developed their intuition far enough. They've not studied the matter. So I can't teach them. And that's my life. I want to teach them, but I can't. And however much I try, I fail. However, some people I can teach. And I teach them by subtle methods. And these subtle methods are made known to me only really when I study the Elven Star points. So it can be extraordinarily useful in refining your sense of self beyond the obvious. There are people that don't know that their zodiac sign is helpful in determining an interpretation of their personality. If they understand that they're Pisces and therefore very sensitive to the mood and feelings and situations of others, rather than Aries, which is not like that. They're determining what their path is very clearly, what is the case. Or Taurus, that's saying, let's settle that so that the foundations upon which you're building are strong. These essential messages are very important for people if they don't know anything about who they are compared to others. But some of us want to go further than that. And when we look at the Sabian symbols, we understand that we're not just Taurus, we're 16th degree of Taurus. It's an aspect of Taurus that other Tauruses don't share. So you get much more refined in your division of self into a 30th part now of Taurus. Like that's very well defined. But some of us want to go even further and find out what we're like on a much more subtle level in every scenario in life. The Elven Star is what gives us access to that knowledge. And we come to understand this secret I've been referring to, where there is no determined truth about who you are. It doesn't exist. It's not a false statement. It's just inadequate to define the full complexity of how it all works. And how it all works is that within certain constraints, we have freedom to express our own narrative. Now, this is true of everything. So, within certain constraints, and at the moment, our species, we can't fly. So, we have that constraint. But within that, we can do all manner of movings around according to our own choice of what we can do. And the same applies to every single facet of human behavior. There are constraints put down by our communal reality. So we need to eat every day. We probably need to work to get the money to buy that food. Those are the constraints within which you're born. But within that, you can create your own story. And this is what we're doing with this Elven Star system. Basically, what we're saying is we're self-determined. We're not shaped by society any more than our interaction with society is shaped by us. And to have that freedom of interpretation where you can jump from one to the other, I am not a product of my parents' wish for me or society's requirements of me. I'm not a product of that. Only, those are the constraints within which I operate, but I can develop my own story, my own narrative, and you can actually push the boundaries of those constraints when you do that. So, I'm talking about going through these Elven Star points one by one, and I'll explain each of the sort of primary indicators of each point. There comes a time at the end of a profound, committed, passionate study when you get all 7 points, you just understand yourself very clearly in all the nuances of possibility in your life, and that comes from the Elven Star descriptions, so that you have this awakened consciousness of self where 7 variables are constantly in your mind, constantly in your feeling body as well. So in any situation, you can respond authentically in any different way you choose to. You have the freedom to live out your own life narrative. And the Elven Star is a gateway to do that. It's worth studying. And, if you want to study it, you can apply to join the academy. There's a way to do that in the description. So I'll continue this series of videos with the second point, and we'll go into a more subtle understanding of what this is all about. And I'll use my own understanding of my own Elven Star point to illustrate, to give examples of how it all works.